Hello and welcome to my first screencast in my series on using Adobe InDesign. Today what we're going to be doing is using InDesign version CS6, we will be creating a business card. And not only are we going to use InDesign to, do some actual design work, we will hop into both Adobe Photoshop CS6 and Adobe Illustrator CS6 to explore some of the concepts that we need to understand to create not only a beautiful design, but a design that will print well when we bring it to the printers. So for example, if I go into InDesign and go for File New, so create a new document, keyboard shortcut Command N on the Mac or Control N on a PC. The new document dialog box that we have in InDesign lets you create, for example, a document with the intent of printing it, sending it to the web, or digital publishing. So business cards being printed matter, we will choose print, one page only. And the page size in InDesign, we have a whole bunch of different standard sizes. So letters 8.5 by 11, legal is 8.5 by 14. Tabloid is 11/17. You have European sizes, you have half sizes, you have compact disc, but we also have a traditional US size business card. So the business card is fine. We have the option of choosing portrait mode, which would be the card standing up, or landscape mode, which is lying down. Columns are a very useful thing in design in general when we have a fair amount of space to structure. Considering that a business card is very small, we'll go ahead and only use one column. But we will change the default margin size from 3 picos that we have here to 1. Now notice that we have the little chain icon depressed over here. That's why it's dark. And if I tab out of the top box, automatically all the values will be changed to the value that I changed manually. That's what the chain does. It makes all the settings the same. Now, because we are going to be sending this to the printers, it's important to click the More Options box over here and take a look at the bleed and slug. Now, the slug is not something that will, be very important for us. It's an extra area where people can include information for the printer. Very few applications actually let you define the area for the slug, and people who have been in the graphics industry for a long time, especially those who used to use Quark, are not necessarily familiar with the slug. It's actually become much more well understood since Adobe InDesign came out, and there's actually the slug area right in the new document dialog box. What is important for us is the bleed. Now, the bleed is the part of the document that you will print onto so that when you cut your business card at exactly the right size, that color actually makes it all the way to the edge. Now, for example, if you were going to design a white business card and you're going to print it on white paper, bleed is not very important. But if you're going to put a picture on part of your business card and you want that picture to go all the way to the edge, you actually have to print your business card on a piece of paper slightly bigger than what you want as a final product so that the picture is printed bigger than the final card, and then once the ink is dry, the printer actually cuts them down to the proper size. So they actually cut away a little bit of color or picture, and that is what we call the bleed. Now, the bleed value is 1/8 of an inch. So I can put in 0.125 IN. InDesign understands IN for being inches. And as I tab to the next box, because once again my chain icon is clicked over here, it converts it automatically to 9 points. So that's perfectly okay. And as you can see over here, I have my business card. The black line that's there is the actual edge of the paper. The red line is where the bleed is. So if I'm going to place a picture, for example, and I want it to go at least to the edge here, I'm going to extend it all the way to the red line so that when the printer cuts, he can actually cut through picture. The purple and pink lines in the middle of the card, that's my margin. Now, it's important to respect your margin because there's no guarantee that as the printer actually prints the card that it's always going to remain dead on centered. Sometimes it wiggles a little bit. The paper itself it's paper. It's not super super strong, so sometimes it will stretch a bit. If there's lots of humidity, it may be a little bigger than if the paper was totally dry. So it's an organic material, so there is somewhat of a variance in the printing process, and you have to allow for that. It's perfectly normal. So we will add a little bit of extra picture just in case something goes wrong. Now, once again, I'm zooming out so we can see the business card over here. And what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to put a logo on one side of the card, and I'm going to put some text information on the other side of the card. This is going to be a one-sided card only. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to keep it very, very simple. So down here I am going to pick my text tool, or the type tool as it's known, and I am going to click on the margin over here, and I'm going to drag a text frame so that it fills the right-hand portion of my card. Now I'm just going to invent some information here, so I'm going to call the client, the person who has the card, I'm going to call him John Smith. Now, John Smith lives on 123 Main Street. And of course, I want that to be a capital. And I will make him live, let's say, in, I don't know, Boston, Massachusetts. And his postal code will be, or zip code for the Americans, I don't know, 123456. Now, design is not only about, technically making things appear properly. It's about assigning a certain amount of importance to the more important things, and that is assigning a visual importance to it. So right now, John Smith is as important as his mailing address over here, so I actually want to make him look a bit more important. So I'll double the size of his name, and I might sort of bring this down a little bit so he's not floating all the way there at the top. And I will actually put his information a bit lower there. So this is starting to look, a bit more fancy. So we've got this information over here. All of this is perfectly legible. And let's not forget that we have to be able to call him. So let's say 555 212 5555. So pretend number. So right now, this information that we have placed on the business card, these are fonts. Now, for those of you who have paid attention to the products in the Adobe Creative Suite line of software, Adobe Illustrator, for example, is the vector-based illustration program. If you've ever used it, you know that you can draw squares and circles, you can draw lines, and these lines are basically mathematical little definitions. In other words, you draw a circle in Illustrator, and in the background, Illustrator is doing all the math that says this is a circle. And you can print it at any scale because the math doesn't change. So whether the circle is an inch wide or a foot wide or 10 feet wide, it's still a circle. Fonts are basically the same thing. They are vector-based drawings that a type designer has taken hours upon hours to literally hand draw each character in the entire alphabet, so uppercase and lowercase characters, all the punctuation, all the digits, and also, all sorts of symbols. So imagine, the money sign, the pound sign, the asterisk, hash mark and everything else. So it's actually a lot of work. The beauty of it is because it is a vector-based drawing, you can scale your type to any size and it will come out perfectly fine. That is exactly the opposite of the concept of Adobe Photoshop. Photoshop is a pixel editor and pixels are little tiny squares. So the squares look good at their original size. You may, let's say, make them smaller, but you can't make them any bigger. Or within, let's say, maybe 10-15%, you could probably get away with it. But after that, enlarging pixels is a big no-no. So if I want to place, let's say, a logo on the side of this card, I have two options. I can either go into Adobe Illustrator and create the logo there, which is the recommended way because you never really know how big that logo is going to be used. Obviously, it's going to be very small on a business card, but what if they want to make a banner to hang on the side of a building? That's easy with Illustrator. Illustrator artwork scales very well. In Photoshop, you have to know what your final product is and create the file specifically for that. So if I jump into Adobe Illustrator here and I create a new file, what I want to do, in this case I'm going to keep it really simple, I'm actually going to make a document that is 8.5 by 11. And it's just going to be something that looks very much, let's say, like the Japanese flag. So I'm basically just going to make a red circle. They're going to pretend that it really looks like a logo. So I can draw a circle over here, and I can go into, let's say, my color picker in the toolbox over here. I'm going to make the middle red, and I am actually going to take away the black line. Now, considering that I want this to be a logo, I'm going to come back over here and I'm going to make my text white. And, oops, made a mistake there. I did not deselect my circle. Deselect the circle. Take my text tool and I will simply type logo. So that's starting to look like, about the right size. It is black. I did say I wanted it white, so I've selected it. I will come over here and let's say make it white. And there you go, one really fancy logo. Now, if I save this, and I will actually go put this in a specific spot. And there we go. We have saved the logo. Now, this is an 8.5 by 11 page. I've got a very big logo over here. And if I go into my Finder and I go find the spot where I saved it on my computer, my logo file is actually very small. You can see it down here. It is 1.1 megabytes. Considering that it's an 8.5 by 11 sheet of paper, 1.1 megs is not very big. Compare that artwork to exactly the same thing in Adobe Photoshop. So I go into Photoshop, I go new. I am going to make it a US sized piece of paper, so letter size 8.5 by 11, 300 dpi, which is what we should have when we are printing. And I will call this logo as well. Now I'm going to come into Photoshop, I'm going to select some red, I am going to choose a selection tool that is round, and I am going to basically do exactly the same artwork. So as you can see here, it's starting to look very reminiscent of what I did in Illustrator. Now go back, take my text tool. Once again, I will click over here and I will type in the word logo. I have this document. It's basically pretty much the same thing. Fonts aren't exactly the same, but that is beside the point. I will save this file as a TIFF file, which is quite standard for going into print. And so TIFF file down here. I have embedded my color profile, and I will go save. Go back to the Finder, take a look at my logo.ai 1.1 megs, take a look at the same logo built in Photoshop, 25.8 megabytes. It's huge. It's over 25 times the size of the other one, and yet the print quality should be exactly the same. In theory, the Illustrator one should be cleaner, but it is a 300 dpi file. It is, in perfect alignment with industry standards. So when you're doing design, a lot of the technical aspects, boil down to what software are you going to use to do the job. Logo design, as I mentioned before, because we really have no idea where the logo is going to be used in the future, we create the most versatile file possible. So we build it in Illustrator. Not that you can't do it in Photoshop, but Photoshop is pixels. It's limited to the size that you made it. Right now it's an 8.5 by 11. It will print beautifully, but try and print something the size of the building. It's not going to work out. So back to our InDesign file. All of that was leading up to the idea that we have our InDesign file and we will place an external document, so a picture of the logo, and we will place that into the layout over here. So what I want to do in the first case is go to the Adobe Illustrator file and put that basically on my business card. Now, oops, I made a mistake there. So let me just undo that because I did not deselect this text frame. I want this cursor to appear here so that I can actually place the logo on the side. So when you go into the place command, just make sure that you don't have a previously created box selected because it will replace whatever's in there with what you're trying to place. So if I come over here, notice that my logo shows up at its real size, which is huge. It's way too big. Remember, I designed something 8.5 by 11. I'm trying to fit it on a tiny business card. Now, the beauty of Illustrator is that I can take, let's say, the edges of the box over here. I can make that basically fit, and I can even right-click on that box and go into the fitting contextual menu, and I want to fit the content proportionally inside that box. Okay, and you see that InDesign automatically comes in and does all the math for me and places it perfectly. Also notice that I'm way too far. I am going beyond the black edge over here. I'm going beyond the paper. I'm even going beyond the bleed, and my logo would be cut off. So I'm actually going to just move that over a little bit, and I'm going to keep it within the margins. So the moral of the story is that when you have artwork coming from Illustrator, you really do not have to worry about the size. Because it's vector-based artwork, it will fit perfectly fine, and even if you are enlarging it or reducing it, because it's vector-based, you basically have nothing to worry about. You place it, you make it look pretty, and you keep on going. The fact that this might be something like maybe 10% of its original size, because it's vector-based information, that is completely irrelevant. Now, if we switch hats and we decide to move this off to the side, create a new text box, not a text box, but a picture box or a frame, okay? I'll take a frame. I will make it in essentially the same position over here. And I will place my Photoshop file. Now, once again, I will right-click on this, I will go into fitting, and I will fill my frame proportionally, or fit the content proportionally. My logo's still there, okay, it is working okay, but look what happens when we go in and we take a look at the links palette. And this is where, if you know what you're looking for, you can spot trouble. The actual PPI over here, so the pixels per inch saved in the file is 300. That's what I need to print. But because I've made my logo so much smaller than the size at which it was, that 300 pixels per inch has become 1980, which technically is way, way, way too much. You could get by, 300, 330, about 10% more. But after that, the more you go up, or in fact, the more you go down, if you go down too far, you lose quality, but you go up too far, you lose quality as well. And the other thing to pay attention to is that the color space of this logo is in RGB. RGB is great for things that end up on the screen, but terrible if you're trying to go to print. So the trick is to take a look at what you're doing and figure out just how big that picture has to be. Now, for example, if we take one guide and we place it here in Illustrator and we take another guide over here, this is the width that I want my logo to be at its widest. You can, let's say, move the 0 point of the ruler by grabbing the top corner over here, moving that and aligning it on the guide. And we can see that right now we will put this in inches just to make it rather simple. And our width is just shy of about 1.5 inches. So let's keep it, let's say 1.25 inches just to make things easy on ourselves. So if I go back to Photoshop, this is what I want, but it's 8.5 by 11. I want it to be 1.25 inches wide. So what I'm going to do is in Photoshop, I go into image size, and I can do it in inches. I want my width to be 1.25 inches, but because there's a little bit of white space on either side, I'll do it 1.5 inches. So a little bit of extra. Notice that my 24 megabyte file will now become 767 kilobytes. So radically smaller than the first one. Still 300 dpi, just a lot shorter. So it has been resized. If I take a look at it at 100%, it's much smaller. And remember that RGB, the color space was wrong. I'm going to flatten my image to get rid of the text layer that was there. So we had the text floating on top of the red circle. So I've flattened the image and I will convert it to CMYK. RGB is light, so light bouncing off the paper, but CMYK are the inks actually on the paper. We're going to the printers, we need colored inks. Click OK. And now I will just save this file. Go back to my hard drive, take a look at my AI file, Adobe Illustrator, still 1.1 meg. My CMYK TIFF that has been reduced to the proper size, 1.6 megs. A little bigger, not by much. And now if I go back to Photoshop, notice that there's this little warning sign over here on the edge of my picture box telling me that something is wrong. And it is echoed by the same warning symbol inside my links palette. So it means that the original source file has been modified. And if I double click that, it will update. Notice that the little symbol over here is gone. There was a sort of redrawing of the preview on the screen. I come over here at my color space is CMYK, and my effective PPI right now is 350. So it has, it was sort of slightly reduced inside this window, but I can always sort of change that. I can come back, let's say, to my fitting and, center it or fill my frame proportionally, or fit my content proportionally rather, so that it's resized to the proper size. Right now it was fit before, so let me just kind of force that to be a little bit bigger. You can see that it's gone from 300, the actual PPI, to an effective PPI of 331. I will say that that's okay for now. It's 10%, which is okay. Ideally, you should have 300 dead on. But for the purposes of today, we'll say that it's good enough. So right now I have my logo on one side, I have my text on the other, and the only thing that I want to do is I want to add a little bit of color so that my card, has a little bit of design sense to it, and also I want to take advantage of the fact that I want to use the bleed. So putting a background color is really not terribly difficult. We create a box and we go into the color picker and we choose a color. So for example, I can come, let's say, over here and choose something, well, probably still in the reddish area, so somewhat of a relationship to my red logo. And I will take away the actual take away the black frame there, so I can do this over here, for example, and say no outline, so no stroke around the box, and I will move this square, or this frame rather, on top of my design. And right now, because I created it after the logo, InDesign understands it as being on top, but I want it to be behind. So once again, I can right click and I can use the arrange command to send that box to the back. And there's my logo over here. Now notice that the logo comes in with a white background. I can actually play with that and define the relationship between one placed element and another with different options. So for example, we have the logo TIFF, which is here, the logo AI, which is on the edge. We have the text, and we have the rectangle. So what I want to do is I actually want to play with my AI file over here, and I'm going to go into something called, let's find it, where is it? It is the transparency. Now, obviously, you can tell that I have been using other applications for quite a while, and sometimes some of the things that I used to do, let's say in QuarkXPress, kind of evade me in other applications. But what I want to do is I want to come in and I want to change the qualities of this box over here, and there we go. So it was in the right click, I was looking in the wrong place. So effects, transparency. And basically I want to give this layer, if you will, and I'm going to turn on the preview, so that what is on the layer, everything that's white, I want it to disappear. So white cannot darken anything, now can it? Okay. So darken gets rid of the white. It changes the color of my red a little bit, but I can always try different options over here to see if they give me what I want. And this is part of the creative process over here. You are going to do exactly what you want artistically by using different combinations of features inside the software. So let's say that, just to keep things simple, I'm going to use it at Darken, and I'm happy with that. So what we have is we have the actual business card. Remember that the outline over here, the black outline, is the edge of my paper. The red outline is where the bleed must go. There's no bleed on this area over here. There's basically white that goes all the way to the edge, so there's nothing to be worried about there. But because I want this over here, and I want this brownish color to go all the way to the edge of my card, I have to put it at least all the way to the bleed line, which is in red. I can go beyond it, that's not a problem. But if you were to stop short of it, the printer could have some problems with it. It might be very difficult for him to cut it without giving you a little sliver of white paper or something like that. So you can be generous, there's nothing to worry about. As long as you respect the area of the bleed, you should be okay. So right now, I'm going to say that I've actually finished this business card. The easiest way to send this to the printer is to actually make an Adobe PDF. Now, InDesign is a great program for creating PDFs because it's Adobe technology. So, two Adobe products, one creates the other without any problem whatsoever. So in the presets, you have high quality print, which is actually not for going to the printers. It's more for doing high quality color photocopies, laser output, something like that. Good quality, but not color separations and actual, ink on paper. PDFX is a set of industry standard PDFs that are built to perfect specifications. Among other things, they're good for archival or archiving of digital documents. To keep things simple, I'm just going to choose press quality, as in printing press. So press quality is perfectly okay. And I will be saving this in the same location, so inside my folder with my two logos. So I'm going to call this business card. And I will simply click Save. Now, because I chose the proper preset over here, I went to Press Quality, the Export PDF box comes in. It has the Press Quality setting over here, so it is a preset. Most of the things that are here you will basically leave alone. There's no options to go in and change. But what you do want to do is you want to have the marks and bleeds. And these are the pieces of information, if you will, that the printer needs to be able to do a good job. In other words, you check all printer's marks, the crop marks, bleed, registration, color bars. All of this information will be printed around the area of the business card. So, for example, the printer knows where to cut so that all the cards are exactly the same size. They will have, let's say, the registration marks, which are little symbols, so that when the printer prints with 4 inks, cyan, magenta, yellow, and black, they're all perfectly aligned one on top of the other. And the other thing that we need to do is we have to make sure that our bleed information is actually being used. So use document bleed settings, and what we put in when we went new document is there automatically, so we don't even have to do anything. And then you just hit the export button. So believe it or not, we're actually done. If we take a look inside our business card, this is what our final product looks like. So we have the actual business card. These colored boxes at the top are references for the printer. So when he has to print a pure black, he will measure this black over here to make sure that it is dark enough. Same thing for the white. It has to be pure white. It can't be, let's say, slightly gray. And they have measurements for all the tones in between. So if the printing press is going a bit too dark, he'll know. Same thing, if it's going too light, it will be obvious when they check this over here. The other color bar, the other bar is for colors, so we have yellow, magenta, cyan, blue, which is a mix of cyan and magenta, green, which is cyan and yellow. And so if there's one of the inks that is not printing in the proper proportion, these colors will be off. So once again, your printer will be aware of that. The marks that are over here, these are called the crop marks. So when the printer has to cut your card, he's basically going to follow these lines as a guide and cut through that. These little target things are the registration marks. This is what the printer uses to be able to print his 4 inks in perfect alignment. They have to completely match up with that. And this is exactly what we can send to the printer. It goes straight from PDF to the printers. There's no need to send the InDesign file anymore. It is simply a PDF-based workflow. So as a summary, remember that you want to use CMYK elements inside InDesign. So you print with printing inks, not RGB light. And your PDF must be print quality and include all the printer's marks. That, for, let's say, Graphic Design 101, covers most of the mistakes that people will do when they go to the printers for the first time. RGB elements inside a print project, improper bleed, and no printer's marks. So that's the beginning. If you can remember that, you'll do fine. Thanks for watching.